why phrases like "I feel like" and "if that makes sense" aren't actually bad.
Some people aren't going to like you. I remember thinking like, yeah, I'm definitely not going to stand up in front of an audience and be like, I command you to whatever.
Oh, well, you had to be there. No, I didn't, because that's why we invented stories. So I, in fact, didn't gotta be there.
What's up, rhetoric nerds? Welcome back to another episode of Rhetorically Speaking, a podcast committed to banishing banality one speech at a time. And speaking of banishing banality, which is a fancy word for like the cliche, the trite, the obvious, I'm excited to kind of deviate a little bit from the usual plan today because a couple of weeks ago, Amanda Montell put out a call for language experts to talk about filler phrases, specifically that women and minority people use that sometimes get called stupid or ignorant or like, I'm so sorry, and overly apologetic and sometimes not feminist. And she used me in the article. So I'm actually just going to read the article. And if you don't know about Amanda, I don't know her personally. I only know her because of this exchange. But she's written she wrote this amazing book called Word Slut, which is about feminism and the English language and how certain words get earmarked as feminist or not feminist and the problems with that binary. And then she's got a new one coming out soon called Cultish, which is about the language of cults. And she includes things like Soul Cycle and Scientology. And she's a linguist who kind of has one foot in linguistics and one foot in pop culture. And so obviously, like, I love her stuff. And it was really exciting, and the piece is so good. It's called Language Lowdown: Why Phrases like "I feel like" and "if that makes sense" aren't actually bad. And not only actually bad, but how kind of calling them unfeminist or criticizing women for using them because they disempower them is sort of part of the problem of using patriarchal norms to police other people's language. And it came out on a website called Sunday Edit, which is a beauty, wellness, and health women, kind of like a women's publication. And I put the link in the show notes. But I'm actually just going to read you the piece. You'll hear me cited toward the end. And if you want to talk more about sort of some of these tag phrases and filler phrases that you use that maybe even I have maligned or criticized on Instagram, let me know. I'm at Rhetorically. Amanda's also on Instagram. You can tag her. And it'd be cool to hear some people maybe defend some of these filler words, quote unquote, or filler phrases that actually might be doing a lot more work for you than people give you credit. Without further ado, here is Language Lowdown: Why Phrases like "I feel like" and "if that makes sense" aren't actually bad, by Amanda Montell for Sunday Edit. Recently, I've noticed a TikTok trend where women poke fun at their overuse of phrases like, "Does that make sense?" "I feel like," and "sorry if that's unclear," both in emails and in spoken workplace conversation. Repeat after me. We are not undermining our own authority in 2021. One feminist influencer captioned a video compilation of her repeatedly cringing at all the times she's ended a sentence with, "if that makes sense." On its face, encouraging women to own their authority by stripping their vocabularies of, quote, insecure-sounding phrases seems like solid and empowering advice. But as a feminist linguist, I know that it's actually rather off base. If you're a woman who's ever been made to feel anxious about not sounding confident enough, know that it's not your manner of speaking that needs questioning. It's our society's standards for what authoritative speech sounds like in the first place. These TikTok videos might seem like nothing but a harmless internet trend, and yet, sending the misguided message that there's something fundamentally wrong with the way women write emails can achieve more harm than humor. Allow me to elaborate. In sociolinguistics, the expressions "does that make sense?" and "you know what I mean" fall under a language category called tag questions. And the phrases "I feel like" and "if that makes sense" are called hedges, also known as discourse markers and sometimes labeled filler words. For decades, popular media has taught us that A, these phrases are something that only women use, B, women are conditioned to talk like in this demure fashion because we've been taught that it's more traditionally feminine and thus acceptable to express doubt in our own convictions, and C, removing these phrases from our vocabularies is simply the feminist thing to do. But according to linguistic studies, this prevailing wisdom is not only false, but both reflects and perpetuates pre-existing biases about gender and authority. In natural conversation, tag questions and hedges are not just signs of insecurity, but instead serve a range of complex social purposes. When you crunch the numbers, cisgender men do not use fewer hedges in natural conversation than women overall. We simply notice hedging more when women do it because we tend to be more critical of women's speech in general. In our minds, the default sound of authority is a dude's voice. Thus, we are less likely to scrutinize his delivery, even if he's drenching his speech in hedges and tag questions like feta cheese in a casserole dish of TikTok pasta. Consider this study. In 1989, Oxford sociolinguist Deborah Cameron took an empirical look at tag questions, the frequency, the particular type of tags, and the environments in which they were used. What she found was that despite common misconceptions, tag questions serve well over a dozen different functions based on the interaction and dynamic between participants. For example, there are tag questions that request information. Yesterday was your last day at work, wasn't it? Tags that indicate concern for the addressee. Try opening this pickle jar, would you? Tags that ask for reassurance. That is the right answer, yeah? Tags that threaten the addressee. You were about to leave without saying goodbye, weren't you? Tags that facilitate conversation. Bridgerton is the most addictive show of the year, right? Tags that soften a criticism. You haven't been spending as much time on your homework lately, have you? And so many more. Ultimately, Cameron concluded that gender had almost nothing to do with, quote, how many tags one uses. Men and women uttered them at basically the same frequency. And while gender had something to do with the kind of tags used, a person's level of power in an interaction was far more pertinent. But here's the kicker. The specific types of tags favored by women actually reflected more authority, not less. Get this, according to Cameron, women are overall shown to use more of these facilitative tags I mentioned, which express interest and solidarity and work to invite another person into the discourse, which is a pretty charming thing to do if you ask me. They essentially establish a speaker as the facilitator of a conversation, like a gracious host. Interestingly, facilitative tags are also consistently used by people in so-called, quote, powerful interactional positions, regardless of gender, like television hosts and courtroom judges. Meanwhile, men are generally shown to use more modal tags, which request information. John Quincy Adams was the 4th president of the United States, wasn't he? Equally, there is a pattern showing the use of these tags among powerless speakers, quote-unquote, like young students and defendants on the witness stand. Again, regardless of gender. What this means is that the insecurity people sense in women's use of, does that make sense, is mostly misunderstood. It is theoretically possible that women call upon that specific phrase more frequently than men do. I have not yet confirmed this with data, but even if that's true, it doesn't make it bad and in need of fixing. In many cases, phrases like, does that make sense, are really a sign of strength or solidarity that's simply been misinterpreted all along because it's coming from a woman's mouth. Translation, women's use of these expressions doesn't make them victims in need of help. Instead, it makes them facilitators in need of understanding. In the end, feminist linguistics is all about sharing unbiased truths about language so that women and other marginalized speakers can make better informed decisions about how they wish to speak and how to perceive the speech of others. And now here I come. That's me, not Amanda. Quote, at the end of the day, the most important thing about being a speaker is that you speak in ways that make you feel empowered and that you are using phrases such as, I feel like, on purpose. Comments, Dr. Lee M. Pierce, an assistant professor of rhetorical communication at SUNY Geneseo and host of the Rhetorically Speaking podcast. Back to Amanda. So even after looking at all the information, if you ultimately decide you still want to rid your speech of tags and hedges, then go for it. But also try to resist judging other women for not doing the same. Quote, when weighing in on the speech of others, think if their verbal fillers are bothering you, consider whether it's really about their words or your internalized biases, says Pierce. No shame, just try not to put your biases on other people, end quote. Perhaps the next viral TikTok trend should be cringing at all the times you negatively misjudged a woman's speech, including your own. Or better yet, celebrating all the times you busted a myth invented by the patriarchy. Thank you so much for being an ally in the fight against cliches. Look for new episodes of Rhetorically Speaking dropping every other Tuesday. And help other rhetoric nerds find the show with a shout out on social media or, good old word of mouth.